It was the middle of the night when Zainat suddenly woke up, overwhelmed by a strange restlessness. The air was calm, the weather fine, and she wasn't unwell, yet her heart felt heavy, almost as if something had gone terribly wrong. Confused and anxious, she reached for her phone. The screen lit up, 3:00 a.m. Without understanding why, her mind went to her daughter, Fariha. She was supposed to be asleep in the room next to hers. Zainat got up quietly and walked toward Fariha's room. She gently pushed the door open and froze. The room was empty. Her heart stopped. Her feet felt rooted to the floor as if the ground beneath her had vanished. 1,000 terrifying thoughts raced through her mind. Where could Fariha possibly be at this hour? Panic rising, her mind darted toward a troubling suspicion. Their house servant, Ramiz, had been acting strangely over the past few weeks. Subtle things, too many small, odd behaviors that she had brushed off as her imagination. But now, in the face of her daughter's disappearance, all those doubts came flooding back. Without wasting a second, she rushed toward the servants' quarters. The door was ajar. Her hand trembled as she slowly leaned forward and peeked inside. And what she saw made her gasp so sharply it stole the breath from her lungs. Fariha, just 15 years old, was sitting on Ramiz's bed. Zainat's name was known to her neighbors as a calm and collected woman, but in that moment, everything inside her crumbled. Her daughter's presence in that room at that hour was something her mind refused to process. Days earlier, she had first met Ramiz under very different circumstances. He was a frail-looking, 50-year-old man sitting under the blazing sun on the side of a road. Something in his tired eyes had stirred her compassion. She had pulled over, rolled down her window, and offered him some money, but he had pulled his hand back. "I'm not a beggar," he had said quietly, lowering his gaze. "I want to earn through honest work." His humility and desperation struck a chord in her. After a brief conversation, he told her he had no family, no home, and no source of income. He only wanted work, not charity. Zainat had driven away with his story echoing in her heart. That same evening, after discussing it with her husband overseas, she had offered Ramiz a job. She had believed she was helping someone in need, but now, standing outside his door, everything felt like a betrayal. Just weeks before that night, Zainat had brought Ramiz into her home with good intentions. She lived alone with her teenage daughter, Fariha, while her husband worked abroad. With no male presence in the house, and after firing their previous servant for theft, she had grown increasingly cautious. But something about Ramiz's humility had earned her trust. She had given him a small room in the house and assigned him general housekeeping duties, grocery errands, kitchen help, and odd jobs around the home. He was swift, efficient, and respectful. For a man his age, he moved with impressive energy. In return, he asked for nothing more than 2 meals a day and a roof over his head. Even his salary was modest. Over time, Zainat had grown comfortable. Ramiz's dedication seemed unmatched. He cleaned without being asked, cooked with care, and even fixed household items that had long been neglected. He never laid a hand on anything valuable, and Zainat had tested him on purpose by leaving money and jewelry within reach. Not once did he touch them. She had slowly started to trust him more than she trusted most people. Fariha, too, had begun to take to him. At first, it was just casual conversation, polite hellos and requests for snacks. But soon, Zainat noticed they were speaking more often, laughing in the kitchen and exchanging stories. It comforted her at first. Fariha had always been clingy, always at her mother's side. But with Ramiz around, she had become more independent, less needy. Zainat allowed it, even encouraged it. She was often busy on video calls with her husband, planning future trips and dreaming of being together again. Fariha seemed happy and the house was running smoothly. Then one day, Ramiz mentioned that he knew how to drive. It felt like a gift. Driving Fariha to and from school was one of Zainat's most tiring responsibilities. Now, with Ramiz handling even that, she felt free, finally free to live a little. She began meeting friends again, spending afternoons out, and even submitted her visa paperwork to visit her husband in Dubai. It seemed perfect. Everything was finally falling into place. But beneath that sense of peace, a slow mistake was growing, one that Zainat would only see too late. In her pursuit of freedom and love, she had handed over her daughter's emotional care to a man she barely knew. The signs were there, but buried under trust and comfort. She had no idea how close she was to disaster. Zainat's life was suddenly full of color again. With Ramiz handling nearly everything at home, she was able to enjoy social outings without guilt. She laughed more, stayed out longer, and counted down the days until her visa approval. The idea of spending a month in Dubai with her husband thrilled her. For the first time in years, she felt like a woman, not just a mother. Faria, on the other hand, had grown unusually quiet, though not in a way that seemed alarming at first. She did her schoolwork, helped around the house, and seemed content. She didn't complain about her mother's outings and never protested being left alone with Ramiz. On the contrary, she had become so used to him that she spoke to him more than anyone else. What Zeenat didn't notice was how often Ramiz and Faria were alone. Whether it was in the living room watching television or in the kitchen preparing tea, their time together had increased. And more importantly, Faria had started to rely on him emotionally. One evening, Zeenat returned home earlier than usual. As she stepped inside, she saw something that made her pause. Faria sitting next to Ramiz, and his hand lightly resting on hers. The moment they noticed her, Ramiz quickly withdrew his hand and rushed into the kitchen. Zeenat gave Faria a sharp look, but her daughter smiled awkwardly and said, "He was just reading my palm." Zeenat was disturbed by the scene, but the explanation softened her suspicion. She thought about saying something more, about boundaries, about what's appropriate, but she held back. If she planted a seed of doubt in Faria's mind, she feared her daughter would become clingy again, especially with the Dubai trip so close. Faria had always feared being alone, and now that she had someone to talk to, Zeenat didn't want to interfere. Her silence, she convinced herself, was a temporary decision, just for a few more weeks. Once she was back from Dubai, she'd talk to her daughter and maybe set some clear boundaries. Her visa arrived. The excitement was overwhelming. Faria even helped her pack and showed no signs of protest. That surprised Zeenat. Faria had always been emotional about separations, but this time she was calm, maybe even distant. Zeenat mistook it for maturity. She hugged her daughter tightly before leaving and reminded Ramiz of his duties, especially to care for Fariha as if she were his own child. She left for the airport, unaware that she had just stepped out of the frame of her daughter's life at the exact moment she was needed the most. Dubai felt like a dream. Zeenat was finally reunited with her husband after so long. The days were filled with shopping, beaches, and candlelit dinners, while the nights offered the intimacy she had craved. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about home, responsibilities, or her daughter. She was just a woman in love. She checked in with Faria now and then, asking how school was going and if everything at home was okay. Fariha's responses were short but polite. "I'm fine. Studying. Don't worry." Zeenat interpreted the brief messages as signs of independence. After all, her daughter was growing up and Ramiz was there to help. Ramiz, too, would occasionally send a message, mostly about groceries or bills. Nothing ever raised suspicion. Everything seemed to be running smoothly. Zeenat sighed with relief every time she put the phone down, but what she didn't know, what no phone call or message revealed, was how quiet the house had become. Faria had changed. She barely spoke, barely ate, and avoided her friends. The sparkle in her eyes had dimmed, replaced by something heavy and unspoken. She spent long hours in her room, staring at the walls, flipping through old photos of her parents. She didn't blame her mother, not fully, but she felt abandoned in a way that hurt deeper than words. Her mother had always been emotionally distant, but this was the first time she'd felt invisible. She missed feeling protected, guided, understood. Ramiz, once a source of comfort, now felt like a haunting presence. He hovered around her like a shadow, always too helpful, always too available. And then came the night that broke the last thread of her composure. Zeenat had returned from Dubai, her arms full of gifts and her face glowing with happiness, but the house didn't welcome her with the warmth she expected. Faria was there to greet her, but something in her body language, cold, tense, detached, made Zeenat uneasy. There was no excitement over the presence, no giggling or clinging like before. The servant, too, was different. Ramiz didn't smile much and avoided meeting Zeenat's eyes. When she asked how everything had gone, he muttered a vague, "All was fine." Zeenat was too tired from her flight to question further. But over the next couple of days, unease crept in like a slow fog. Faria avoided conversations, and Ramiz offered nothing but silence. Something was wrong, she could feel it, but no one was telling her what. Until one afternoon, Zeenat overheard her daughter whispering behind closed doors. words that would shatter the illusion of peace she had wrapped herself in. The soft murmur behind the closed door was faint, but Zinat's ears caught it. She paused just outside Faria's room, heart thudding with an inexplicable dread. Her daughter's voice, shaky yet intense, floated through the wood. "I can't take it anymore. I'll tell her the truth. I have to." There was a silence. Then another sentence, barely above a whisper. "It's suffocating. I feel like I'm fighting a battle inside every day." Zinat froze. Her hand hovered near the doorknob, but she didn't enter. Yet. She waited, hoping to catch more, but all she heard next was the click of a phone being put down. Taking a deep breath, she gently pushed open the door. Faria jerked her head up, startled. She quickly hid her phone under the pillow, wiping her face with trembling fingers. Zinat's gaze locked with hers, searching for answers. "Who were you talking to?" she asked, her voice low but firm. "My friend," Faria replied, too quickly, her tone defensive. "Why are you entering without knocking?" Zinat blinked. That was new. Faria had never complained about her presence before. She tried to brush it off. "I was just checking on you. You seemed upset." "I'm fine," Faria snapped, eyes darting away. Zinat stood silently for a moment, sensing the wall her daughter had built around herself. She wanted to probe further, but something in Faria's eyes stopped her. So she nodded and left, but her mind was now in turmoil. Something was definitely wrong. Her instincts screamed at her. This wasn't normal. Later that evening, she noticed how Ramiz avoided eye contact and seemed nervous when passing her in the hallway. The man who once spoke with respectful ease now mumbled and hurried away like a guilty child. Her thoughts circled endlessly until they landed on a decision. She needed to observe closely, quietly. Over the next few days, she watched her daughter and the servant interact. Faria seemed distant, barely speaking to him. Ramiz, on the other hand, seemed desperate to remain in her good graces, often peeking into her room, offering help she didn't ask for. That contrast was telling. Zinat recalled how close they used to be, laughing together, solving chores, even reading side by side. But now there was tension. Something had cracked between them. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was heavy with unfinished words. One night, restless and filled with dread, Zinat awoke to a sudden wave of anxiety, a mother's fear. She rose from bed and, heart racing, tiptoed to her daughter's room to check. The room was empty. Faria was gone. Zinat's breath caught in her throat. The room was eerily still, the sheets on Faria's bed slightly ruffled, but her daughter was nowhere to be seen. 1,000 horrible thoughts flashed through her mind in an instant. Her feet moved before her thoughts could catch up, carrying her down the hallway toward the servant quarters. Ramiz's door was slightly ajar, just like before. Zinat's hand trembled as she reached out, slowly pushing the door open. The dim light from the hallway spilled inside, and what she saw made her blood run cold. Faria was sitting on Ramiz's bed, wearing a red nightdress, the same one Zinat had misplaced weeks ago, the same one she had bought long ago for her husband. She froze at the threshold, her heart pounding so violently it echoed in her ears. Faria looked up, and for a split second, her expression collapsed. Shame, fear, and something else flickered across her face. Ramiz stood frozen beside the bed, panic written all over his weathered face. Zinat stormed in. "What is this?" Faria gasped, her voice cracking as she tried to speak. "Mama, please." But Zinat had already turned to Ramiz. Her fury erupted like a storm. "I trusted you. I gave you shelter, food, work, and this is what you do? With my daughter?" Ramiz raised his hands in defense, eyes glistening. "Please, it's not what it looks like. I swear, she came here on her own. I kept telling her to leave. I did nothing." "You expect me to believe that?" she screamed. But before Zinat could strike him again, Faria grabbed her arm. "Stop it, please. Don't hurt him." Zinat looked at her daughter in disbelief. "I came here because I wanted to," Faria whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I wore this because I wanted him to notice me." The words shattered Zenat's world. Faria stood, her hands shaking, her voice trembling. I love him, and I'm not a child anymore. Zenat stepped back, her legs barely holding her weight. You're 18. He's 50. I don't care, Faria said quietly. Zenat turned toward Ramiz, who had now collapsed onto his knees, crying. I told her no. I always did. I never touched her, not once. It was too much, too twisted, too real. Zenat couldn't understand how her own daughter had reached this point, how all the lines she thought she had drawn had blurred. The mother who wanted freedom, comfort, and love had missed the signs of her daughter's silent unraveling. And now she had to face the price of that neglect. Zenat sat on the edge of the bed, her face pale, her fingers clenched tightly together as Faria stood in front of her, still in the red nightdress. The silence between them was heavy, almost unbearable. Outside, the city was quiet, unaware of the storm that had erupted inside their home. I didn't do this out of rebellion, Faria began, her voice hoarse. I did this because I was lonely. Zenat's eyes finally lifted. Lonely? You have me. No, Faria interrupted, her words shaking. I don't have you. You're always on the phone with him, always talking about how much you miss him. You leave me alone for days just to be with him. Even when you're here, you're not really here. Zenat's breath caught again, this time with guilt. Her daughter wasn't screaming, she wasn't blaming. She was revealing the truth, raw, unfiltered, and painful. I used to hear your voice late at night, Faria continued. The way you spoke with him, the things you said. I didn't understand them at first, but they made me feel things I didn't know how to deal with. I started watching things online, movies, dramas. I got curious, I got confused. And then she paused, glancing toward the door, where Ramiz had quietly stepped out, leaving them alone. And then, one day, I looked at Ashraf differently. He was kind. He cared. He listened. When I felt invisible, he noticed me. Zenat lowered her head, every word piercing like a blade. I wore your dress tonight, Faria whispered, because I thought maybe if he saw me like that, he would accept me, but he didn't. He told me to leave. He said I was too young, too vulnerable. He said I didn't know what I was doing. Zenat's chest tightened. She had been so sure that Ramiz was the danger, but the truth was more complicated than that. She had missed the emotional gaps in her daughter's life, the spaces where affection should have been, where guidance should have lived. I'm sorry, Zenat whispered. Faria sat beside her mother, leaning her head on her shoulder. I don't want to be this way, Mama. I just wanted someone to talk to, someone to make me feel seen. Zenat slowly wrapped her arm around her daughter, holding her close. I see you now. I swear I do. It wasn't enough to erase what had happened, but it was a start. The healing would take time. And Zenat knew she could no longer be a part-time mother. That night, Zenat couldn't sleep. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, her daughter's words echoing in her mind. Every moment she had prioritized her own longing, every time she had ignored the signs, played back like scenes from a slow-moving tragedy. She hadn't realized how deeply her absence had carved hollowness into Faria's life. The next morning, Zenat sat with Ramiz, his eyes low, his posture humble. I want to speak honestly, she began, her tone calm but resolute. Last night could have ended very differently. I could have blamed you. I nearly did. But my daughter spoke the truth. You didn't take advantage, you stopped her. For that, I owe you more than I can express. Ramiz looked up, emotion flickering in his weathered eyes. She's a child, madam. She doesn't understand yet what she's looking for, but I saw how empty she was. I tried to stay distant, but she kept reaching out. I was afraid you'd misunderstand. But I swear to you, I never crossed any line. Zenat nodded. I believe you, and I'm not going to fire you. But things will change. I'll be here now, fully. No more trips, no more late-night calls in front of her. I failed her once. I won't again. Ramiz's shoulders relaxed, as though a weight had been lifted. Later that day, Zenat called Javed. Her voice was firm. I can't come back to Dubai for a while. Fariha needs me. She's at a turning point, and if I miss this, I may lose her. Javed understood. His voice softened. Do what you must. Our daughter is more important. And so, for the first time in years, Zenat stopped running. She took over Fariha's routines, waking her up, preparing breakfast, asking questions without hovering. Fariha resisted at first, unsure how to accept this version of her mother, but soon she began to open up. They walked together in the evenings, they laughed. Sometimes they cried. Zenat even started attending her school meetings, talking to her teachers, sitting in her room just to be near her while she studied. One afternoon, Fariha quietly slipped into the kitchen while Zenat was cooking. I missed you, she said, her voice barely audible. Zenat turned, eyes moist. I missed me too. They smiled, mother and daughter, slowly repairing a bond that had frayed, not from hatred, but neglect. And though the past still lingered, they had found their way back to each other, one honest conversation at a time. In the days that followed, a quiet rhythm returned to their home. The air no longer felt heavy with secrets or unspoken guilt. Zenat began to notice small things, how Fariha would linger in the kitchen just to be near her, or how she would ask for help with things she'd never asked before. These gestures, so ordinary, were the first true signs of healing. One evening, while folding laundry together, Fariha broke the silence. Do you still think I'm a bad girl? She asked, eyes on the clothes in her lap. Zenat paused. No, she replied softly. I think you're a lonely girl who needed her mother and didn't know how to ask for her. Fariha didn't respond right away, but she leaned her head gently against Zenat's shoulder. It was the closest she'd come to an apology, and the most honest acknowledgement of her pain. Meanwhile, Ramez kept to himself more than ever. He only spoke when spoken to and rarely entered the rooms unless asked. He no longer accepted tea from Fariha, no longer smiled casually. He moved like a man who knew his future in this house was uncertain. One night, Zenat found him in the backyard watering the plants. You don't have to walk on eggshells, she said quietly. Ramez looked up. I don't want to give you any more reasons to mistrust me. Zenat hesitated. I don't mistrust you, but this house, this family, needs boundaries now. Not just rules, but love with clarity. Ramez nodded respectfully. I understand. I'll always be grateful that you believed me. A week later, Zenat sat Fariha down for a proper conversation. No judgments, no raised voices. I want to talk about what happened, not to punish you, but because I need to understand. So that I can be better, and so can you. Fariha's eyes welled up. I didn't know what I was feeling, I just felt things. I saw love on screen, in your voice when you talked to Dad, and I didn't know where to put those feelings, so I put them on someone who was here. Zenat reached across the table and held her hand. You were never bad. You were confused, and that's okay. What matters is what we do now. Fariha nodded. The next day, Ramez quietly came to Zenat with folded hands. It's time I leave. You've been kind, but staying will only make things harder. Zenat looked at him for a long moment, then whispered, Thank you for protecting her when I wasn't there. He left that evening, but his honesty had saved more than just his job. It had helped rebuild a broken home. After Ramez left, the house felt quieter, but not in the suffocating way it once had. It was the silence of calm, of healing. Zenat finally understood the weight of what had almost been lost and what had been saved by a moment of brutal honesty. She began dedicating more time to Fariha, not just in routine matters, but in truly being present. They started cooking together, walking in the evenings, even watching old movies side by side, though now Zenat was more careful about what they watched. She no longer left Fariha alone for long stretches. It wasn't about control, it was about companionship, trust, and balance. One afternoon, while going through a drawer, Fariha found the red nightgown. She held it for a moment, staring at it with a mix of shame and sadness. Then quietly, she walked into her mother's room and handed it over. I don't want this anymore, she whispered. Zenat folded it carefully and placed it back. She didn't speak, but the gesture said enough. Fariha was slowly finding her way back, not just to her mother, but to herself. Zenat, on the other hand, had learned perhaps the hardest lesson of all, that a child, even when grown in years, remains a soul needing guidance. Her mistake wasn't in trusting a servant, it was in overlooking the silent cries of the one person who needed her the most. She stopped her long video calls with her husband. Instead, they set fixed times when Faria was busy, ensuring privacy didn't come at the cost of awareness. She also began journaling, something she hadn't done in years, as a way to reflect on the responsibilities of motherhood beyond just providing shelter and food. Months passed. Faria grew more confident, grounded, and focused. She returned to her studies with clarity and purpose. Her emotional outburst had been a cry for connection. And now that it had been answered, she no longer looked for that comfort in forbidden spaces. One evening, she looked up from her books and said, "I think I want to become a psychologist, to help girls like me, who get lost because they don't feel seen." Zenat smiled. "Then we'll make it happen." And so, from a night of deep confusion and nearly irreversible damage, came a story not of scandal, but of recognition, forgiveness, and second chances. A mother found her daughter again, a girl found her own voice, and a home once fractured by distance was stitched together by truth. Let this story remind every parent: be the comfort your child runs to, not the absence they try to fill.